Latinx. Latinx. People have feelings. So many feelings, in fact, that whenever the Pero-like team uses the term Latinx in a post or video, the comment section is invariably devoted to some heated discussion about the term. Some people love it, some people hate it. Some people just don't care and want to get back to leaving inappropriate comments about Gadiel. I'm looking at you. Either way, there's some strong opinions out there. So let's talk about it. Let's dissect the X.
Why would you do that with your hands? Why would you overcomplicate this? All you had to do was say Latinx and just sit there. Just look at me when your mom doesn't pick up your calls.
Let's dissect the X.
Nailed it.
Latinx is a term widely used amongst professors, activists, and journalists. It was coined in the last few decades, supposedly in 2004 by the LGBT community, but it didn't really gain traction until around 2015 when Tumblr and Twitter pushed the term into popularity. So why Latinx? Well, the Spanish language is gendered. Most nouns are either considered masculine or feminine, and more often than not, the language supports a dynamic where the masculine has a higher status than the feminine. For example, a group of women are called Latinas, but if one man joins the situation, suddenly the group is now called Latinos, which is just one example of how the language has an inherent preference for masculine over feminine. Latinx challenges this patriarchal language structure and helps dismantle binaries. It's an important term for people who don't identify as either male or female. It's inclusive, it's affirming, and it says you don't have to identify as solely male or Latino to be valued and recognized by your language. Now, some people do take issue with Latinx. They think it seeks to dismantle too much of our past and culture. We start putting X's places, what's gonna happen to the rest of the language? Or maybe you are non-binary, but you don't think the term serves as a really good identifier for you. But what do I know? Let's talk to somebody who strongly identifies as Latinx about why the term is important to them.
Of course, hi. I identify with Latinx very strongly because it leaves space for folks who are non-binary and a little more fluid in their gender identity.
The Spanish language does unite Latinos. We are very proud of the language, and yet for most people residing in South or Latin America, this language is an imposed language. It came from Spain. It's a Western language that was gendered and sort of brought onto cultures that perhaps, like you said, had a third gender or weren't so rooted in masculine and feminine.
I feel an own disconnect with my indigenous roots in Mayan and Aztec cultures. They were goddesses and gods that were bi-gender, and folks who brought in the Yoruba and Orishas.
How were you sort of introduced to the term?
Mostly through academic circles. I heard it mostly in undergrad with folks who were in Chicano studies and also in queer studies. Just seeing the term kind of evolve and really take off on a kind of viral mode. A lot of folks have been seeing it on social media. A lot of folks have been using it in at workplaces that work with Latinx communities. I work with a lot of nonprofits that kind of are adopting that term too.
We're sort of trying to find what fits right, and maybe it's not Latinx, but for right now, it feels like what is a good representation for non-binary and non-gender conforming, and maybe that will change.
I don't think that Latinx is perfect. I think for now it's kind of opening a dialogue, a discussion to maybe evolve to another term, but I feel that right now Latinx is kind of where a lot of folks feel comfortable with.
I think a lot of the fear that comes from Latinx is people thinking that we're trying to change the whole language and take the gendering out of the language and dismantle that and that history.
We don't want to impose that you have to adopt neutral language all the time. If you want to use she, her pronouns or he, him pronouns, you're still valid in your experience, and we don't want to say that you can't do that anymore. There are still a lot of trans folks who still live in the binary and who still want to be recognized as woman or man or masculine or feminine. So not to erase the other identifiers or the other terms, but rather to just have it visible so folks understand what it is and what it means. I think it's okay to be complicated, it's okay to be questioning, it's okay to be figuring things out, because I feel like in life there isn't really a clear-cut route. If you ever feel that Latinx doesn't fit for you, that's more than okay. You're always welcome to kind of play around with labels until you feel that something fits.
So there you have it. Love it, hate it. If the term's for you, you get to decide whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it, don't use it. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe just don't tell people that suddenly feel seen and heard by their language to not use it. Is that a crazy idea? I don't know. It's like Gadiel. Rolling sound. Did you hear me? Stuff like Gadiel. Give me 2 seconds of indoor voice Gadiel. No, not quieter than indoor voice Gadiel.